Not too long ago, I published a video on Lori Grimes, who is perhaps the single most hated character on The Walking Dead. And in that video, I attempted to argue that Lori did not deserve all of the hate she was given by the fan base. In fact, I viewed her to be, as a viewer commented on my video, overhated. Meaning that the negative reception to her character was not often proportionate to what she actually did. Albeit, she definitely deserved most of it, no doubt about it. That being said, as someone who's published video essays on both Shane and Lori, I found myself constantly being more empathetic towards Shane Walsh's character. And I wondered why that was the case, because objectively speaking, he was a worse person than Lori, and he was an actual villain on the show. Now perhaps it's because of Jon Bernthal's performance, or perhaps it's because of the fact that we all know a Lori Grimes in our lives. Maybe it's because Shane was indeed ahead of the curve, despite not having the strength to actually live in a new world. Whatever the case may be, I have an interesting hypothesis, one I developed after comparing and contrasting the sins of both characters. As I see it, Lori was more consistently annoying, and she committed more wrongs than Shane. But Shane committed far more severe atrocities that pretty much outweighed whatever Lori ended up doing, but he did so at a much lower rate. Not to mention that he also did plenty of good things on his descent to madness. The man simply contributed more to the group's survival than Lori, and his personality was easily far more likable. I also feel that people know Shane could have been saved, at some point in the story. But conversely, in the eyes of many viewers, Lori couldn't possibly be redeemed, precisely because her shitty behavior was so consistent and narratively flat. But fact of the matter is, Lori was on her way to a redemption arc at the beginning of Season 3. And then they killed her off early for shock value, when redeeming Lori and then killing her during the governor's prison assault would have been far more impactful for the story. So yeah, I guess we could say the comics got that part right. Be that as it may, I'm going to try the impossible with this video. I'm going to attempt to prove to all of you that Shane was a worse person than Lori overall, especially once he went off the deep end. Now, if you want to argue that Season 1 Shane or early Season 2 Shane was better, sure, go ahead. I'm going to be focusing on where the character ultimately went, instead of cherry-picking the Shane we all wish we would have gotten in the story. Anyways, with that said, let's begin with this comparison of sins. Now, for those of you who are familiar with my work, you would know that I personally don't see an issue with Shane and Lori's post-apocalyptic relationship, mainly because there's really no objective way for you to say that it is wrong, but many of you do see something wrong with it. And many of you, for some reason, often place the blame on Lori and not Shane. And for those of you that do place the blame on both individuals, many of you tend to place the majority of it on Lori. But here's the brutal fucking truth. It took two to tango, and both Lori and Shane consented to this post-apocalyptic dance. Shane was Rick's best friend, all the way from childhood, and he was basically a member of his family. And Lori was his wife of multiple years and also the mother of his son. If you find the romantic escapade to be wrong, which by the way I don't see how you could reach that conclusion objectively, then you'd have to concede that both of them are equally culpable here. One broke the bro code and the other was his fucking wife. Both of these people also kept their romance a secret until they were confronted by Rick, which to me is a bigger sin than the actual act that they committed. Shane also impregnated Lori, and Lori kept said pregnancy a secret. Now, I know some of you would blame Lori for getting impregnated, so I'm gonna just have to remind y'all that consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy. Baby Judith is Shane's fault, no doubt. If anything, you can blame Lori for not getting an abortion when she had the chance. Wait, I'm sorry, what's that? You don't agree with my view that consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy, mainly because you have a misunderstanding of how human reproduction works and how logic actually works and how consent works. Well, believe it or not, this is something that is commonly understood in moral philosophy. In fact, most moral philosophers and bioethicists would agree with me to an overwhelming extent. But instead of explaining it to you here, you're more than welcome to check out my explanation on my second channel, Captain Gold Premium, where I discuss everything from ethics to religion to economics and other niche moral issues. Just remember that viewer discretion is advised, because I can get pretty blunt on that channel. Also, if you would like bonus content, please consider becoming a channel member. It's pretty cheap, and it would go a long way towards me being able to continue to entertain you with videos like these. With that shameless plug out of the way, it would be important to point out that Shane actually sexually assaulted Lori as well. She didn't deserve it, despite the fact that she emotionally abused Shane prior to said assault, because sexual assault is not an appropriate retaliation to emotional abuse. And yes, I covered this in more detail in my Lori video, so if you haven't seen it yet, check it out. That being said, Lori did abuse Shane emotionally, both intentionally and unintentionally. She did not treat him with decency when he deserved to be treated fairly. Like, let's be real here, he saved her and her fucking son, and indirectly saved Rick's life. Shane, on the other hand, could not accept Lori's desire to be with her husband. She wanted him around for Rick's sake, and because she still had feelings for him. Both can be true statements, guys. But Shane didn't have to stay. No one literally forced him to stay, nor did anyone force him to be a simp. Also, he claimed to love her and Rick, yet he cared little for their actual desires. On the other hand, Lori was a terrible, post-apocalyptic parent to Carl. Now, I know some of you smooth-brained apes think that Rick was also bad at keeping an eye on Carl. But Lori was the stay-at-home wife who chastised Andrea for not cooking and doing laundry. She took on the role of watching Carl. She literally accepted the role of babysitter and housekeeper. Meanwhile, Rick was busy looking for Sophia, managing group logistics, putting out fires like retrieving Herschel and fighting Randall's group. He was busy dealing with Shane and Walkers while figuring out what to do with Randall and dealing with keeping the group's cohesion intact. The man was busy as fuck, and he still found time to be with Carl. What the fuck was Lori's excuse? Lori also did not allow Shane to father his soon-to-be infant. And no matter how you view it, this is beyond fucked up. And I believe this is what ultimately pushed him over the edge. Albeit he is still ultimately responsible for his own actions. Because if he was stronger in the mind, he'd accept her desires and move the fuck on. It's not like Judith wasn't gonna be in his life still. That said, I believe being Judith's guardian could have saved Shane. Weak men need to be given purpose because they cannot find it themselves. Hence, being Judith's guardian would have given him someone to live for who wasn't Lori and Carl. Because he sure as hell wasn't living for himself. It would have been the single greatest olive branch to mend the strained relationship between Shane and the Grimes family. And it could have made Shane stronger in the long run as well. Both Shane and Lori were emotionally reckless, impulsive, and immature or responsible. In a way, they were perfect for each other. While Shane knew what needed to be done in order to survive in this new world, he lacked the strength to actually do what needed to be done in most cases. Sacrificing Otis damaged him permanently. He could not put down the zombified Sophia, nor could he mercy kill Dale. Lori, on the other hand, was selfish while also being a failed people-pleaser, which is quite a feat. A typical housewife who just wasn't equipped to survive the Walker apocalypse. She also clearly had problems with internalized misogyny, considering she got mad at Andrea for not doing her womanly duties at the farm. Not gonna lie, that's kinda fucking bad. But all of these flaws pale in comparison to Shane wanting to kill Rick just so that he could fuck his wife and have his son call him daddy. This is what ultimately made him a tragic villain. Rick's shadow who had to die by Rick's own hand. And this is also what makes him objectively worse than Lori. Because at the end of the day, he is responsible for his own actions. Lori didn't make him into a would-be murderer. His own weakness did. Period. If he was stronger, nothing Lori did or said could have influenced him negatively in the way that it actually did. And as annoying as Lori is, she never tried to kill someone just to steal their family. She also didn't sexually assault anyone. And if you disagree with Shane's sacrifice of Otis, which I personally think he did the right thing that night, you could also argue that Lori never wrongly sacrificed somebody. Yet we routinely find ourselves being kinder to Shane than Lori. And I really think part of the problem is Lori's consistently bad behavior when compared to Shane's gradual decline. Be that as it may, it is undeniably true to state that Shane was ultimately worse than Lori as a person. And I'm not honestly too keen on debating that because it's sort of fucking obvious. To disagree here is to literally admit to the entire world that you have either mental issues or an inability to think critically. Lori does get undeserved hate, and I dare suggest that Shane not only gets undeserved hate, because he does, let's be real here, but he also gets undeserved admiration. That being said, I still love Shane as a character. He's arguably the best written tragic villain in The Walking Dead. Hell, he's probably the best written villain period in the entire franchise. The fact that he could have been saved is what makes him such a compelling character, and the fact that he's also Rick's shadow is what also makes him even more interesting. There was a point where he wasn't a villain as well, where he was one of the good but flawed guys. And I believe people really have a hard time separating the genuinely positive potential of Shane from the tragically dark reality of Shane. Unfortunately for the fan base, what Shane could have been is not and never will be what he was at the end of his story. At the end of the day, Lori should not be viewed as objectively worse than Shane insofar as moral content is concerned. And she sure as hell isn't a villain, she's just a stupid bitch. We can empathize with Shane and we can come to understand why he lost his mind, but we cannot justify his villainy and then claim that Lori was somehow worse. Period. Anyways, if you enjoy this sort of content, you know what to do. Like, share, and subscribe, and become a channel member as well, and also come see me in my next Gold Standard video.